a few months after that, with a couple of friends that I'd met in Perth, I did a road trip from Perth up to Darwin, and the west coast of Australia is just beautiful. And I think that was a very, very spiritual time for me as well, just looking at beaches and sunsets, and I had begun to start writing, and I think it was the very beginning of, I would start writing and I would write things that I felt were really beyond myself, beyond my personal capability. Um, Things that would seem to me just to be very, very profound and very deep. Um, Things that I would definitely surprise myself with, and felt almost as if I had outdone myself. Um, so anyway, that was a very, very interesting sort of period of time for me. I carried on and did a bit more travelling around Australia, and eventually I came back to New Zealand in February of 2009. Basically, I couldn't find any more work in Australia, and decided that I'd come home and possibly look at studying again. Well, I didn't end up studying, but eventually I got another job at a freezing works in my hometown, and so I was working at the freezing works, and sort of just, I was living at home with mum and dad again, and I was just putting most of my money into trying to pay back these debts that I still had from my courier business, and by the time that I'd spent all this time in Australia trying to pay them back, and not being successful in paying very much of that back, it was well and truly time to start paying those back. I was starting to get letters and phone calls and things about those. So anyway, I started to really knuckle down on paying those back, and just try to work step by step to try and get myself back on track, and to be, I guess, just authentic about it, buying things that I could actually afford, not living in a dreamland that I was in when I had my courier run, and was looking at all the self-help and The Secret and these kind of things. I was living in dreamland and living a life that was outside of what I was actually creating at that time. Buying whatever I wanted, and just expecting that, oh well, it's okay because I'm going to be rich soon. Because I think that it's good to have an optimistic and a positive outlook, but you've also got to balance that with being authentic to who you really are and where you're really at. And that was what I started to learn during this phase. When I came back, I'd sort of been broken down, I guess, almost back to square one, and I was just slowly rebuilding, and I had now authenticity about it. But after a few months there, it was the middle of winter now, and I started to get very, very depressed. I just felt like my life wasn't going anywhere. I felt like I wasn't attractive. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't feel that girls were interested in me. And I basically started to go downhill very quickly, to the point where I was actually wanting to do harm to myself. And it started to get very, very low. And one night I came home from work. I was working on the night shift, and I got home about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I turned on my computer and sat down, opened up a text document, and just sort of started venting my frustrations and my loathing of myself in a text document. And then I started writing a reply, and the reply was very peaceful and very loving, and essentially would just keep saying, I love you, you are more beautiful than you imagine, and all these kind of things. And this voice, this reply, was completely unfazed by how angry and frustrated and down I was, and just quietly and gently affirmed me and encouraged me that that I was worthy, and all of these kind of things. So that kind of began a journey back upwards, I guess. At that point I had kind of hit rock bottom and was now in the process of slowly but surely rebuilding. And I had a little bit of a revelation, I guess, and started to realize that underneath all of that there was a deep love and a deep worthiness. Basically, over the next few months, I continued to dabble with a little bit of writing. There was a kind of a novel idea I had that I was writing on, and I would find every now and then when I was writing that I would begin again to write with that kind of inspiration that was beyond, I felt was beyond myself. And occasionally I would ask questions that I would write, like that night when I came home from work really down, and receive a response. And that was something that I began to do more and more. Then I got into a relationship shortly after that, and that relationship became extremely challenging due to a whole number of circumstances. She got pregnant in January of this year, very, very early January, and we have a son together now, a beautiful little boy. But our relationship ended shortly after she got pregnant, and again that was another very challenging time for me, being us being apart while she was pregnant with our child, and there were all these things going on, and a very tumultuous time. But I slowly began to turn back to my writing and asking these questions, and receiving this kind of what I believed was revelation. Once my son was born in October, 1st of October, I had a couple of weeks off work, and every night I would make a point to just take 10 minutes out of the day to sit down and write. And I'd also been doing that quite regularly in the months leading up to that as well. We'd been busy with work. I'd been doing 12-hour days, but I would come home, and again I'd just before I went to bed, I'd try and make 5 or 10 minutes to sit down and just do a bit of writing and receive that revelation and that inspiration. Quite often when I have ideas, what I will do is I'll record them onto my cell phone and then play them back and write them down when I get home, if I'm out, if I'm doing something. And about a month ago, early November, I was recording something into my phone, and all of a sudden my voice changed, and there was a very distinct, quite American sounding accent, and it was quite alarming to me at first. But this was, I think, it was definitely a distinct and a new experience for me. And I'd also had a lot of experiences where I'd be having a spiritual conversation with someone, and sort of like my writing, it was as if something else would take over, and I would begin to speak with a wisdom that I felt was beyond my own personal wisdom. So that basically brings us to where I am now, which is just continuing with that, trying to continue to develop these things and have a deeper and deeper connection to that part of myself. I think that the biggest realization for me, and the most important thing about this whole journey, has been learning how to get in touch with the deeper and highest part of myself, and realizing that all the answers, all the power, all the solutions are already there in that place. It's just a matter of remembering that and getting to that. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now, but I hope that you've enjoyed this and found it informative. Maybe it's resonated somehow with your own journey, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.